I gave all I had throughout my life, love time, money, and myself, until I heard something one evening while eating food I had purchased that broke my heart forever. This is a tale of enlightenment rather than only shame. This story is for you if you've ever felt invisible in your own house. Please subscribe and let me know where you're viewing from in the comments section. I'd want to hear your tale as well. As I ran errands for a dinner I wasn't even supposed to be at, I could still hear the clink of crystal glasses, the low hum of jazz music streaming through the house I paid for, and the smell of the roast chicken I had seasoned that morning slowly cooking. However, I was there because Olivia had neglected to inform me that her parents were coming over. Once more, and once more, the home had to appear flawless. I should have realized I shouldn't have stayed. "And you are?" Her mother questioned me with those half-condescending, half-inquisitive eyes, and I should have known what was about to happen. Olivia laughed as if it were the most hilarious thing ever. "Oh," she said without missing a beat. "That's our unofficial maid, Margaret. Makes the housework well." Everyone chuckled, even my kid, Ethan. I simply stood there, clutching the empty bottle of wine I had carried up from the cellar, and I smiled sweetly as though my heart weren't breaking apart beneath my feet. I put the bottle on the counter, excused myself, and took my time making my way to my bedroom. None of them stopped laughing behind me. Not my own son. To declare that's my mother, I bothered to correct her. To express anything. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I perched on the side of my bed and gazed at the door that I had painted myself when we first moved in. The day I signed those mortgage documents came back to me. My name and credit. My down payment. Olivia wasn't even in the picture yet, and Ethan had just received his undergraduate degree. They had nothing. I gave it all to them, and now, I was the maid now. As usual, I prepared coffee the following morning. Olivia feigned to appreciate the cat I fed, and I waited for her to come downstairs in her yoga attire, too preoccupied with her phone to even say good morning. After a while, she glanced up. I gave her every single key. The front door, the rear, the garage, the mailbox. "What is this?" Her well-groomed brow wrinkled as she inquired. I grinned. She blinked and said, "Good luck paying the mortgage now." What I went down the hall past her, after the pictures I had framed and the furnishings I had selected. I had painted the walls. I just took the coat I wore when I brought Ethan home from the hospital and my pocketbook. I didn't even bid them farewell. As I opened the door, I heard Ethan yelling my name, but I didn't pause. In the driveway, he chased after me barefoot. However, I continued to walk without slamming the car door. Something snapped inside me, so I calmly and gently closed it. It wasn't anger, though, as you may believe. It wasn't sorrow. The most terrible thing of all was that it was clarity. Clarity is silent. It doesn't cry out or plead. It simply knows. I knew where I wasn't staying, but I wasn't sure where I was going. And for the first time in my life, I knew that I was done. Ethan was standing in the driveway looking shocked when I last looked in my rearview mirror. Neither he nor I realized how much he had just lost. Still. It's been said that until you breathe, you don't realize you are drowning. It wasn't freedom that first night in the tiny flat my great-aunt Ruth had left me. Not quite yet. Silence descended upon everything like dust, thick and resonant. It smelled like time in the apartment. There were yellowed wallpaper, old flooring, and a heater that moaned as if it had seen better days. I left my suitcase on the kitchen table and stood there not knowing if I should laugh or weep. I didn't do either. I stood there looking at the broken tiles and thinking about the house I had just left. But it was no longer a house. Not for me. I moved like a ghost throughout the course of the following several days. The bedroom's bed frame shattered, so I slept on the sofa. I consumed microwaved soup and peanut butter sandwiches. I didn't call anyone because no one had phoned me, not because I was alone. Ethan didn't email or SMS. Not a word. I guess Olivia had warned him against it. Or worst, perhaps he simply didn't give a damn. I couldn't stop thinking about that meal and how they laughed. Regarding his laughter, that youngster was reared by me alone, following my ex-husband's departure. To maintain a roof over our heads, I sacrificed my work, my aspirations, and myself. I packed groceries before dawn and cleaned hotel rooms at night. And I utilized all of the insurance money my parents gave me after they died away to purchase a home. A house. I never requested rent, never demanded payment from him. In Olivia's universe, I had somehow turned into the assistants. I began writing at night, old spiral notebooks. I filled page after page with the type I used to purchase for Ethan in middle school. No one should read it. I penned things I had never stated out only for me. I used to wait for him to say thank you while standing in the kitchen. I would cry in the garage when they went out to eat without inviting me, and I would pretend to be sleeping to avoid listening to them make fun of my TV series in the living room that I had paid for. Then one day, I discovered the old metal trunk Ruth used to store beneath her sewing machine when searching the upstairs storage closet for a light bulb. Rusted and heavy. Anticipating thread and buttons, I forced it open. Rather, I discovered dozens of envelopes, and there was one in particular that made all the difference. It was written in Ruth's recognizable handwriting and addressed to me, dated over 30 years ago. You've returned if you're reading this, and I'm sorry you had to. As I turned the pages, my pulse raced. They were fragile and yellowed. Copies of hospital forms were within. A single picture of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket is included along with notes. Not Ethan, Michael Jameson was the name. Before the letter made sense, I had to read it 3 times. At the hospital where Ethan was born, Ruth worked as a nurse. She claimed to have doubts all the time. The night I gave birth, she had noticed something strange in the nursery. A last-minute change of room. A tag misunderstanding. However, it was already too late when she brought up the matter. She never informed me that the babies had already left for home. Claimed to be terrified. She expressed her hope that she was mistaken. But years later, she discovered a paper hidden in her archives. A peaceful transfer from the hospital to a different family. She realized then that Ethan wasn't my son. My hands were shaking. I gazed at the picture, fearing that I could faint. The name, Michael Jameson. I couldn't get it out of my head. Who was Ethan after all, if this were true? To him, who was I? Then an odd thing occurred. I didn't experience sadness or anger. I was liberated. Perhaps the coldness I always sensed from Ethan was the reason why all those years of suffering and feeling like a stranger in my own life now made sense, not because I didn't love him. It might not have been envisaged. Perhaps I wasn't insane after all, and perhaps he always felt like a stranger. I read every document in that trunk for the remainder of the night. Affidavits, DNA results, and a brief article about the Jameson family were all preserved by Ruth's. They are local, successful, educated, and still reside in the same community. I gently folded the letters back, put them in a fresh envelope, and put them in my bedside drawer. My true son had been here all along, growing up only a few miles away. After that, I spent a considerable amount of time staring at myself in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't embarrassed by the lady who was staring back at me, even though I didn't recognize her. Yes, she was broken, but she was beginning to awaken, and the world didn't yet understand what it meant. There's a certain type of stillness that feels punishing rather than pleasant. After reading Aunt Ruth's letter, I spent weeks living in that type of stillness. I carried the information inside of me like a live wire, difficult to ignore and hazardous to touch. I had no idea what to do with it. I did not contact Ethan. I simply existed. I didn't go in search of Michael. Every day I got up, brewed 1 cup of coffee, gazed out the dusty kitchen window, and contemplated my new identity. Margaret was a mother, a former wife, a caretaker, and a provider of everything, but she wasn't the same Margaret who reared Ethan. But without that identity, who was I? The apartment's heating failed one evening. I must have read the hospital papers 100 times, every line, every signature. Every time stamp it all made sense. I wrapped myself in blankets, lighted a candle, and curled up on the couch with them on my lap. It was authentic. In a hospital that would eventually discreetly settle with another family, in the hopes that the truth would never come to light. My true son, Michael Jameson, was born the same night as Ethan, in the same wing. Ruth had made copies of everything before she died. The fragments of a truth that had been robbed from me were left to me by her. The moments I could have spent with Michael, the birthday celebrations, the first days of school, the skinned knees, the science projects, all of the things I believed I was doing for my child, were the things I mourned, but not for Ethan. They were intended for a different person. But for some reason, I didn't hate Ethan. I hadn't felt a biological love for him. I had assumed it had been unconditional. However, it makes you rethink everything when the person you raised doesn't stand up for you, or even see you. I eventually got myself together on a Tuesday afternoon. I had spent too much time in hiding. I could start someplace somewhere peaceful, but I wasn't ready to face Ethan just yet. When I arrived in town, I was standing across the street at Jameson's Books, a little bookshop close to Main and Elm. It had hand-lettered signs on the windows and was painted a rich green. I had passed it thousands of times before and had never noticed it. Michael, he was there. I didn't have to ask. He had a clean-cut reading glasses and appeared to be around 30 or somewhat older. He was assisting a young lady in locating a book of poetry. His stance was mild but self-assured, and his voice was calm and sweet. My pulse was racing as I stood across the street staring at the son I had never realized I possessed. I didn't go in that day. Instead, I watched as I sobbed quietly and uncontrollably on the pavement, letting the tears slide down my cheeks and under my coat collar. The following day, I repeated it, and eventually it became into a routine. I would pretend to check my phone, sit on the bench on the corner, traverse the block, and sip coffee from a paper cup while observing Michael lead the life I never experienced. It was preparation as well as grief. It wasn't stalking, because I was slowly beginning to piece things together. As I sat outside the bookshop, I began to take note of things like the delivery schedule, customer names, and the store's rhythm. Yes, I was watching, but not only him, Olivia, Ethan, and them. I began quietly following them as well, because I was familiar with their habits. Olivia frequently tagged her favorite wine tastings, yoga studios, and brunch locations in her social media posts. The track wasn't difficult to follow, and what I saw made me sick. They weren't having any trouble. They were acting. Olivia's business, a lifestyle coaching brand, was primarily smoke and mirrors. She paid followers, rented office space, and maxed up her credit cards to keep up appearances. Additionally, Ethan had resigned from his position 6 months prior. Olivia referred to this as visualizing a new chapter. I referred to it as delusion. They had no idea the wind was approaching when they were constructing a house of cards. I haven't yet shared what I found with anybody. As an alternative, I began writing in a second diary that was more emotional and heartbreaking than the first. Dates, names, company filings, and public documents made this one strategic. I was no longer only mourning. I was making plans. They believed that I had vanished, was unimportant and invisible. However, I was more present than ever before and ready to remind them of my true identity. I was speechless when I first saw Michael up close. He was replenishing the biography department while singing to himself on a wet Thursday when the bookshop was almost completely vacant. After I stayed outside for too long, he turned to face me through the front window, and we exchanged a kind, inviting grin. Simply the type of consideration you give to a stranger. And I was a stranger to him. My hands were trembling too much to make it look like I was checking my phone, but I immediately looked aside as my heart tightened. I hurried and ducked around a corner, almost reaching the car before I started crying. How can you explain to someone that they made a mistake in the beginning of their life? How can you look a mature man in the eye and tell him that neither I nor you are who you believe yourself to be? After returning home, I took out Ruth's letter and read it 3 more times. She had not only found out, but had also looked into it. It was verified that Michael Jameson was the name. The hospital didn't tell me since I wasn't supposed to know that she had discovered the settlement documents. What about the Jamesons? They must have had some knowledge. Perhaps not the whole truth, but enough to take a low-key payment. However, I wasn't here to exact revenge on them. Even my purpose for being here was unclear to me. I returned because I simply wanted to get to know him and see if the truth about him might ease the pain in my chest. I began modestly. Michael rung up the book I purchased on his own. He smiled and replied, "Good choice." His voice was warm and comforting in a manner that tightened my throat, but it's hard to find these days. His fingertips briefly touched mine as he handed me the bag. "You own this place." I nodded. He responded, "Sort of." Began with the aid of my parents. They helped, of course, but now that they're retired, I stay busy here. He was supported, of course. Not like Ethan, who had turned around and gave me up as a joke after having nothing but my blood, sweat, and sacrifice. I didn't have parents, but Michael did. We were all crying over the incorrect pieces because the cosmos had jumbled the puzzle, and Ethan had me, but never desired what I provided. I began going casually to the bookshop every few days. I occasionally browsed and occasionally purchased a novel. Michael started to recognize me. "Back again," he'd advise, with that effortless grin. We struck up a conversation about the weather literature and local happenings, but I haven't yet revealed my identity to him. The time was not right. In the meantime, things were changing in the background of my previous life. Ethan texted me asking whether I was all right. Not much more. That's what I received after 3 weeks of quiet. I had nothing further to say, so I didn't respond. However, I began to delve farther into their world. The house deed was still in my name when I pulled it up. Without my consent, Olivia had attempted to remortgage. Denied because she was unable to pay the mortgage. Ethan didn't make any money. It would have been too simple for me to expel them right once. Instead, I needed them to sense the gradual unraveling. The terror. The knowledge that the ground upon which they stood was not only flimsy, but also belonged to someone else. Me. I kept a thorough new notebook writing every night. Each and every receipt. Every time Michael brought up a pastime, a beloved book, or a recollection from his early years, I put it in writing. In between the lines, I started to see the reality more clearly than I had ever seen before, not to use against him, but to comprehend the kid I never got to raise. Since Ethan was swapped at birth, he didn't treat me badly. Olivia gave him license to treat me badly, so that's what he did. He began to view me as someone to be dismissed rather than someone to be respected at some point. Michael, on the other hand, didn't know me at all yet. In just 5 minutes, he showed me more kindness than Ethan had in 5 years. I was not prepared to inform him. I was near, but not quite yet. And I wouldn't just reveal my identity to him when the time came. Everything I knew about the hospital would be shared with him, concerning the transition. I had to complete seeing the breakdown of the life I had already left behind before I could talk about the life that was taken from us both. Because I wouldn't be looking back until the last piece fell. I never intended to become a shadow in my own tale, but sometimes stepping out of the spotlight is the only way to see people clearly. Things changed inside of me after that day at the bookshop. Quiet, like a gentle daybreak spreading across a frozen landscape rather than abruptly. Unavoidable. I took my time. I wasn't only attempting to get back in touch with a son I had never met. I was attempting to take back my identity. I started to speak a bit louder and walk a little higher. After purchasing a used laptop, I started entering my notes into folders. Timelines and evidence, names. This was now strategy rather than a journal. Living. One thing became quite evident: lies and duct tape held Ethan and Olivia's world together. My house, where they resided, was still registered in my name. Olivia, a Sins Her Lifestyle company, was a phony empire with phony customers. Phony endorsements. She was driving a nice automobile that she couldn't afford and giving personal growth advice, building her brand on keywords and filters. I was able to locate the LLC documents online. I looked over tax documents. I searched for evaluations of businesses. Her posts were carefully chosen. Every occasion they went to was a chance to take pictures. And there was a ton of debt behind it all. Maxed out cards. Ethan's educational debt remains unpaid, along with a private loan that has defaulted. A mound of bills was choking them, but they were too arrogant to speak. Or perhaps overconfident. That's when I realized it would all fall if I pulled a single string. However, I haven't yet, because I needed to take one more step first. Michael was still unaware of my identity when I went to the bookstore. However, every encounter eroded the terror. We discussed literature and life, about little details, TV series, excellent coffee, sounds from the city. He once told me when we were sitting in the small cafe next door, how his passion for literature drew him into the teaching profession. He once sipped his tea and said, "You remind me of someone I can't identify." I grinned. "A librarian, perhaps?" He chuckled. Perhaps I thought about that moment for days. He wasn't just someone I liked. Not simply from the file I had read I knew who he was, or the picture that Ruth gave me. However, in the manner in which he listened and handled others. The silent power within him. His position made it seem like mine. He was composed. I began to dream of a different existence because of his presence. One in which I had reared him. One where I accompanied him to soccer matches and supported him from the sidelines, and another where we made cookies in the kitchen. My chest ached from picturing it so clearly. However, I was unable to turn back, so I made plans for the future. My initial action was to contact a lawyer for justice, not retaliation. I wanted to sell the house. I made the down payment, and I was legally entitled to it. Paid all of the bills. Ethan had always stated, "We'll put it in your name later," but he never signed it over. Don't hurry. Naturally, there was no hurry for him. Everything was being paid for by me. I now wanted my rights and my name returned. My house. Legally, if not physically. I had a meeting with a lawyer downtown. A lady my age. Direct and incisive, she listened without passing judgment. "We'll submit the motion this week," she added, nodding slowly as I explained what had transpired. With a calm hand, I signed the paperwork. Later that night, I passed the house. The light on the porch was on. Olivia was using her phone to browse while she sat on the swing. I'm holding a glass of wine. Ethan was playing video games on the couch inside. They were living their lives automatically. It wasn't about punishing them. They had no idea that the earth underneath them was already changing. The goal was to get everything back in balance, and they would experience the same helplessness I did for years after the house sold. And perhaps, just possibly, they would comprehend what it meant to be cast aside. I didn't yell or bang doors. I simply observed, bided my time, and left. None of them even realized that the first domino had fallen yet. Silence, in my opinion, is more powerful than sound. When the formal notification was sent to Ethan and Olivia, I was sitting in a cafe near the courtroom, stirring honey into my tea with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. That true power isn't in how loud you battle, but in how profoundly you know you're right. According to my lawyer, they will get it by morning. Sharp. At Ethan, my phone buzzed. I gazed at the screen until the ringing stopped. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice. I just flipped it over and let the quiet do the talking. I simply wasn't prepared to hear him tell a falsehood. When I opened my email later that afternoon, I read his brief note. Just what are you doing, Mom? Give me a call, please. Olivia is freaking out. She was, of course. The individual they believed to be too feeble to care was in possession of the deed, and they never saw it coming. So they were unable to refinance when the mortgage came due. I received another call a week later, this time from Olivia. I also didn't respond to her. Margaret, we really need to talk, she said in a tense, almost controlled message. All of this is simply a miscommunication. You're going through something and we're here to help, but you're risking our lives, and that's unfair, Ethan says. I listened to him twice. She claimed ownership of the house, and I didn't say anything. They didn't understand yet, but they will. It got more incisive and purposeful. Ethan arrived at my residence 2 days later. Before he even knocked, I had a glimpse of him through the peephole. His hair was uncombed. His eyes had dark shadows under them. I didn't open the door, and I saw a guy unraveling. He remained there for a while. Once knocked, then again. Mom, please don't do this, she begged. I placed my hand on the knob while standing on the opposite side, but I didn't turn it. Like I had for years, I allowed him to endure the pain of being ignored. My lawyer completed the papers to market the house the next week, and I would receive the entire profit, every cent, legally, morally, and emotionally. It was all mine. Olivia made an effort to counter it, claiming that her contribution was valuable. Let's see her prove it in court, remarked my lawyer with a smirk. She never made any investments in anything other than looks. Thus, she was unable to do so. Now, one filter at a time, those were disintegrating. Word spread. Clients started withdrawing, and Olivia's parents stopped leaving comments on her social media posts. She attempted to convey the injustice of generational property law in a video. People could see right through it. Me. Nothing was posted by me. I simply continued going to Michael's bookshop. We reconnected over coffee and discussed an old book that we both adored. He suggested that I read a memoir. He said it's about forgiveness as much as mourning. I nodded and swallowed the knot in my throat. He went on, I think you'd like it. I might, but not just yet. I was still in mourning, or forgiveness. I started packing up old pictures at home, images of Ethan as a newborn, birthday parties where I did all the effort and didn't get any credit, school photos. I didn't discard them. But since the woman who had dedicated her life to give all was no longer with us, I put them aside. And the lady who replaced her, she wasn't upset. The documents were signed, and she was conscious. The residence was being listed for sale, unaware that his life was going to alter too. My actual son chuckled at something a customer said somewhere in that green bookstore across town. but in the most advantageous manner. Since not every loss is tragic, are some of them? Are they disguised beginnings? I had always assumed that masks were worn during costume events. Olivia, however, wore hers as if it were second nature. Perfect. Grinning. Unalterable. She was the type of lady who always understood how to position herself for a picture and how to speak in public with the ideal perspective. However, what about masks? They break eventually. And one morning, while looking through the local company directory, I had the notion to utterly break hers. I had accumulated enough personal filth already. Credit issues, fraudulent collaborations on Instagram, late payments on a mortgage. However, I was more interested in facts than hearsay, something tangible. I engaged a local business consultant since they were unable to spin something. Darren, a male, professional, and quiet. Be discreet. I informed him that I required a thorough corporate audit. Nothing unlawful. Just a thorough dive into its structure in private. He started working once I gave him the name of Olivia's business, Olivia Ascends LLC. He brought everything in a tidy binder a week later. What did he discover? I wasn't even ready for it. Olivia's whole business plan was a fabrication. Several invoices were falsified to seem as though they were from actual clients, and there were no tax filings for the previous 2 quarters. However, the clients were non-existent. She staged photo sessions at rental homes that she claimed were house renovations. Her purported collaborations were nothing more than affiliate links with exaggerated stats. She wasn't only acting like she was successful, she was lying to everyone. Would this stand up to scrutiny? I asked Darren. She's done if this goes public. He continued, glancing at me. In terms of money, professionally. At that point, I decided on a course of action. Everything was printed by me. Then I discovered Olivia's parents' address. These are the same folks who used to giggle in my house while clinking wine glasses and watching their daughter make fun of me in my own kitchen. I sent the file to them, anonymously, without a letter. No signature. There was only a single letter on top that said, "Everything you think you know is a performance." The first cracks showed up 2 days later. Olivia stopped posting on Instagram. No tailored morning routines, no storylines. Strange comments were left on her most recent post, which had an uplifting phrase about being misunderstood. Her world then started to fall apart like dominoes. Her website went down for upkeep. Due to unanticipated circumstances, her most recent workshop was canceled. An old neighbor who continued to follow her gave me the cherry on top. Olivia's mother was heard yelling on the phone and storming out of her house. Red face, purse swinging frantically. There was no filter on what transpired behind those closed doors. It wasn't beautiful either. That evening, Ethan phoned me once more, but I didn't pick up. Another voicemail was left by him. I'm not sure what's going on, Mom. Olivia's parents aren't talking to us. They got some goods from someone. They believe we falsified the documents. Have you done this? I didn't respond. For the first time, he was seeing her and himself for who they truly were. He had defended a lady who ruined everything in her way for years. Let him feel it starting with me. Let him have a seat in it. I went back to the bookstore on foot that evening as Michael was closing. When he spotted me, he waved. Returning. He remarked, opening the door for me to enter. Now is the time for you to just work here. Maybe I should have smiled. There were stacks of paperbacks all around us as we sat on the floor. Without being asked, I assisted him in classifying a fresh cargo. Why have you come here? Not rudely, he asked. I was taken aback by the question and turned to face him. Observe him closely. I hadn't realized that he had my eyes. I said, I like the way it feels in here, like nothing is acting like something it's not. He cocked his head in my direction. I agree. After that, we didn't engage in small conversation while working. No more inquiries. However, something not the truth settled between us in that silence. Not quite yet. However, there's a thread that ties us together. I also stopped feeling like a ghost in other people's lives for the first time. I sensed. And the lady in her own kitchen, who used to be invisible, she had left. Someone they never would have thought of or should have underestimated was there in her place. I used to believe that heartbreak happened all at once, similar to a vehicle crash or a door slamming. However, it isn't the case, not all the time. It can occasionally happen gradually, much like water seeping through a roof, drip by drip, until the entire roof falls one day. What about Ethan? At last, he stood beneath the flood. By then, he had heard the news. The disguise Olivia was wearing had fallen off, and the house was officially listed. Her company was made public. Her reputation was deteriorating, so Ethan did what he usually did, since he had nowhere else to place the blame. He ran over to me. On a calm afternoon, I heard the knock before I saw him. I had just finished my drink when the noise reverberated throughout the flat. 3 gentle raps. Unwilling. Like a knock from someone who wasn't sure if he would be accepted. Or slammed. I cautiously opened the door. He appeared to have gone days without sleep. Unshaven. I'm thinner than I thought. The shirt creased like if he had just lifted it off the ground. He whispered, "Mom." His voice broke. "May I enter?" I didn't respond. He entered and stood in the center of the room, seemingly unsure of what to do with his body, and just moved aside. We were silent for a long time. He cracked at last. "Why are you doing this?" he inquired. "To us?" It nearly made me chuckle. Us, as though we hadn't existed for years. I took a seat across from him in the armchair, composed and calm. "Ethan, I'm not harming you in any way. I'm taking care of myself." His jaw tightened. "The home is up for sale. My home where I was raised. You also gave it away," I remarked in a quiet voice. "I became your maid because you allowed your wife to do so. You giggled as you saw it happen. You never even expressed regret." He simply stared at the floor without denying it. "I assumed you were being overly theatrical. I didn't know it hurt you like that," he said. I gazed at him. "Ethan, that's the issue. You didn't care to find out what upset me. I was only cleaning up after you, and you thought I would always be there. Settling your debt." He winced as he nodded along as you allowed that woman to undermine my identity. "Olivia is not who I believed her to be. I already knew it." He looked up at me at last. His eyes had gone hazy. "I didn't blink, and I lost everything." "No, you revealed it." We were silent for a while. "You are missed." I straightened my posture as he whispered, "You were raised by me." "Fed you," I said, "dressed you, gave up something for you, and you allowed me to be humiliated in the house I purchased." His lip quivered. "I believed that she was assisting me and that we were constructing something. You created a falsehood. And now it's falling apart," I remarked. Then he stood, pacing the space. "Is that all? You just leave?" I stood up. I went to the kitchen drawer and took out the envelope that Ruth had left for me. "I'm going to tell you something now." I held it in my palms. I said, "And I really need you to pay attention." Confused, he nodded. "These are your birth certificates." I gave him the packet. "Go through them." He sat and carefully opened it. He scowled. He read the letter before falling. The medical records. After all those years, Ruth had discreetly requested the DNA test. He glanced up at me, wide-eyed. This isn't possible." "It is. Are you implying that I am not your son?" "You weren't born to me, I'm saying. However, I brought you up as though you were giving you every bit of who I am, despite your desire to avoid it." He became pale. Who is it your true son is, who I didn't respond? He took a seat, feeling shell-shocked. The pages shuddered in his grasp. He muttered, I don't know who I am anymore. You understand my feelings now. For years, I said. He did not weep. Not much, but he broke in some way, and I witnessed it. Not with rage, not with contentment, simply tranquility. Because I escorted him to the door after finally saying what needed to be said, he pivoted. Can we solve this, eyes beseeching? I looked him in the eye. I'm not sure. But it's no longer my job to try, I responded, and I softly shut the door after him, not with animosity, but with decisiveness. Because I wasn't the one keeping it open for the first time in my life. I practiced the talk in front of the mirror for 3 days before deciding how I was going to approach it. In my vehicle. I was holding a basket of oranges in my hand while standing in line at the grocery shop. I was hardly able to complete the whispering sentences. I'm your mom. Something went wrong. You have led a life that was not intended for you. I have too. However, nothing seemed right. After all, how can you bring such a harsh reality into someone's life and expect them to survive? I had to try, though. Michael was at the bookshop. As usual, golden rays of light streamed in through the windows, distributing shadows on the wooden floor and softening the shelves. It seemed like a hallowed location where the truth had its rightful place. I nearly turned around and left when he glanced up and grinned. However, I didn't. Hey. Oh, he said. You arrived just in time. We have received a fresh shipment of rare poetry publications. The knot in my throat was swallowed. In fact, I stated I came to speak. He looked at me for a moment. Something about my voice seems off. Yes. Return now. There was a kettle on the counter as he ushered me through a side door into a small break area. A mismatched couch. Real life, a chipped table. No filtering. We sat. There's a reason I've been here. I got begun. I thought as I twisted my hands together. Softly, he said. You're not really here for the books. I laughed a little dejectedly. No, I'm not. After that, I removed the envelope. The letter from Ruth, the DNA evidence and the birth certificates, and placed it between us on the table. What is this? With caution, he inquired. Something that will completely alter the situation. He gave me a glance and waited. I mentioned that 30-something years ago. My voice broke. The hospital made a mistake. 2 infants, switched at birth. He raised his eyebrows. His face was blossoming with confusion. When I said my son was given to another family, he became extremely quiet, and I was handed theirs. He remained silent for a while. I raised him, I said. I loved him unconditionally. However, he didn't truly love me back. He looked into my eyes, gently piecing together what I wasn't saying out loud. You believe me to be... He glanced down at the letter and said, I know you are. Grasped it with shaking hands. The chronology and the paperwork were within. The justification. Ruth's letter in which she made a silent admission. Silently he read. Every second seemed to drag on forever. He didn't immediately turn to face me once he was done. Simply put the papers down. He remarked, This is a lot, with his fingers still resting on the borders as if he wanted to hang on to something. I am aware. Additionally, you're... Yes, Margaret. His eyes were hazy as he gazed up. I have not yet experienced any emotions. I responded. You don't have to. I'm not requesting a position in your life. I wanted to let you know. I had to let you know. Slowly, he nodded. Why now? Because the silence was becoming intolerable to me. Because the truth was worthy of being heard. I have parents. He leaned back and let out a deep breath. They did a good job raising me. I adore them, and I know it. Never would I beg you to refrain. I felt something I hadn't felt in years as we sat in that small room surrounded by books and the aroma of peppermint tea and old paper. Relief, nor happiness, nor resolution, but the liberation of not having to bear such a huge burden alone. After some time, he rose up and paced slowly. I'm not sure what to do with this, he remarked candidly. I also don't. My eyes were full with tears, yet I don't hate you. I didn't anticipate that much. You didn't have to come, he said, turning back to me. However you did, I responded. I didn't know how not to. He nodded once again, and a silent understanding began to grow between us. Can we go more slowly? He inquired. I wouldn't ask for anything more since I don't want to make this something it isn't. He smiled at me weakly and faintly. For tea, would you want to stay? I returned the smile. I wish I could. That afternoon, we didn't discuss the files again. We discussed the weather and literature, and how he liked the rain, but detested the sound of wind chimes. We had begun something, but not a relationship, even if the past remained between us, unresolved and unadulterated. Not quite yet, but perhaps, just possibly, a beginning. By the time October arrived, there were other changes than the leaves. The house sold more quickly than anticipated. Ethan and Olivia had to leave within 30 days, and I received the whole selling price more than I had anticipated. No more extensions, no renegotiations. I wasn't angry when I evicted them. I had no choice except to expel them. It seemed like witnessing a playset being disassembled as they packed up their carefully crafted existence box by box, knowing that every cushion plant and designer trinket had been purchased on borrowed time. That house had been my jail for far too long. The play was over. The day the moving truck arrived, the illusion vanished. I passed by in my car. I didn't pause. Instead, I observed from a distance as Olivia yelled commands at the movers, concealing her remaining pride behind her sunglasses. Ethan was running in circles while standing on the grass with his phone clamped to his ear. I wonder if he realized I would be the one bringing it, and whether he ever imagined he'd see this day. It wasn't a dramatic fall. Screaming bouts and local press controversies did not occur. However, it was finished. Olivia's parents stopped providing financial assistance, and her company lost all of its key sponsors. Her once immaculate brand was now a topic of conversation in the community. The woman who had made fun of me in my own kitchen was suddenly unable to pay for her daily matcha or her expensive skincare line. Ethan made an effort to get employment. Any work. He moved into a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, but doors did not open since he had no degree, no references, and no recent experience. The lawyer told me this. I didn't rejoice, but I also didn't ask. Because retaliation wasn't the point. It was about repercussions and the truth. In the meantime, my life was gradually and discreetly changing into something new. Michael and I kept getting together, always informally. Coffee, book talks, articles, and brief life observations were exchanged. When he once inquired about my writing, I informed him that I had begun a memoir, that even if I never published it, I had a narrative to tell. You should, he said. Stories like that are important. He hasn't called me mom yet, nor did I anticipate that he would. That wasn't the purpose. We were creating something voluntarily rather than under duress, and it was the decisive factor. He picked up a jar of apple butter and grinned as we strolled through the farmer's market one day. "This is what my mother used to make. Every fall." He spoke my mom in a certain manner. "It didn't hurt. It was natural and felt fine." Correct. Because I had a kid who didn't see me until it was too late, and he had a mother. On some evenings, I drank my tea by myself. I was wondering whether Olivia was still wearing her silk robes and whether Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or the floor. If they turned to face one another now and noticed all they had previously overlooked. I missed the notion of what we were meant to be, but not them. But that kind of grief. It's a shadow. It gradually disappears. An arrogance that increases, particularly when you come to love yourself more than you love their approval. Before the transaction closed, I took one more stroll through my former neighborhood to avoid haunting it. I just wanted to say goodbye. I went past the school where Ethan used to go. I pushed him on swings at the park. I let everything go, including the grocery shop where I would use discounts to buy his favorite cereal. Because I had dedicated my entire life to a family that never returned the favor, I was now giving to someone who may never call me mom, but who yet gave me a kind look. With interest. Respectfully, you don't always need to be saved. All you need is tranquility. And I was at last beginning to sense it. I received the text from Ethan in early November. Only a single line. "Is it possible for us to meet?" I looked at it for a long time, but just once. Weeks have passed since my previous encounter with him. We were silent for weeks, and the gap felt more weighty than any disagreement we might have had. But the tone, something. It wasn't accusatory, irate, or desperate. The sound was one of submission. We met at a little park on the outskirts of town, the sort with a track that wound around a dried-up pond and seats that were rusty. Since the location was neutral, I chose it. No ghosts, no memories. When I got there, he was already there. He glanced up while seated on a bench with his hands clenched between his knees, and for an instant he made me think of the youngster he once was, uncertain and awkward, awaiting guidance. He cleared his throat as I took a seat next to him, being cautious not to get too near. He said, "I'm not here to ask for anything." I simply nodded without saying anything. I wanted to know. I took the manila envelope from within my backpack. The one with Ruth's letter once more. The papers. Without saying a word, I gave him the DNA findings. He didn't open it. As if he had read it 1,000 times, he just held it on his lap. "I conducted my own test," he stated. "I got the same outcome after you informed me." I gave another nod. "I tried to figure out what to do with it for weeks," he added, and I kept thinking, what was I if I wasn't your son? Then I glanced at him, glanced closely, and I murmured quietly, "You were my kid. However, I handled you like—" He winced. "I know how you treated me." "I'm not pleading for your pardon," he responded hastily. I stated bluntly, "You don't deserve it, and neither do I." "That doesn't mean I despise you, though." His eyes were moist as he turned to face me. "What does that mean?" "It indicates that I now love myself more than I do the thought of you." The ensuing quiet was very meaningful. I believed I was shielding Olivia as he bent his head, supporting her. But wasn't I simply hiding behind her? "You allowed her to change the narrative. You also gave the pen to her." Slowly, he nodded. "I wish I could undo it." "You can't." Two people who had shared a life based on deception sat like that for a time, in the chilly November air, unraveling it. Then he said something that caught me off guard. "I hope he treats you well." I gave him a glance, surprised. "Michael." he explained. Your son. My throat tightened every breath. He's kind, I said. Kind. He gave me a little smile. I suppose you were partly responsible for that. We both chuckled, soft and exhausted, not happy. Finally, he replied, I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you, but I'm not bitter either. However, if I ever find a location, only a portion of it. He did not have to continue the statement. I stood there and gazed at the pond. The leaves were strewn all over the place like ashes. I'll give it some thought, I answered. He gave a nod. That's more than I had hoped for. I briefly put my hand on his shoulder as I turned to go. That was the end of it. The last second. No resolution, but comprehension. I came to the realization that this was sufficient since I was no longer required to fix him, nor did I need to be repaired. All I needed was freedom, and I had it. I was really. The word freedom always seemed too lofty and expansive to me, like something for parades and speeches. Not something that someone like me could truly live, but I finally realized what it meant that morning as I turned the key on Michael's bookstore's front door. The previous evening, he had given me a call. He said in a casual tone that he had something to show me. However, it carried a certain weight. He was standing at the rear wall where a fresh wooden sign had been put over an arched entryway as I stepped in. There was something seething beneath the surface. The next chapter was written on the sign. I grinned. What's this about? I took one brass key from him. Tiny, easy, smooth. I'm opening a new area. Coffee nook, community discussions, and a comfortable reading area. I wanted it to seem more than simply a store. I desired a sense of belonging. You want me to open it once I flip the key in my hand? He gave me a serious look. I want it for you. I gazed at him. He went on in a quiet voice. You dedicated your entire life to someone. They regarded you as though you were backdrop or furniture. However I see you, you've done enough for me to require you to prove anything. My eyes filled with tears. I blinked them back, whispering, You don't have to do this. I understand, he responded. However, I'd like to. I moved to the door beneath the sign and inserted the key into the lock. The turn went nicely. Tall windows let in nice light within, and the walls were lined with shelves that were already partially filled with memoirs and classics. In the middle is a rug, a little table with a tea set and a shabby seat. The room reminded me of a dream I had forgotten I had. I whirled around, utterly disoriented. Michael grinned. Think of it as yours, for as long as you like. I moved to the middle of the room and just stood there, taking it all in. The aroma of fresh paper, fresh wood, and promise. I took a last seat in the flat that evening, with the old notepad resting on my lap. The final page remains blank. When I wrote, I was a giving woman until I disappeared, and then I turned into the woman who took everything back. Not angry, with quiet instead of fire, with honesty, and with a power they never expected. I completed the gift the next day, A nonprofit that helps women start over received a percentage of the proceeds from the sale of the house. Like me, those people were undervalued, abandoned, and disregarded. They gave me a call to express gratitude. I didn't need gratitude, though, since each time I entered the bookshop and turned to the next chapter, I was reminded of my current self. Not the mother of Ethan, Margaret Walker, not Olivia's maid instead. A woman. Survivor. She wrote her own demise. Permission to start anew was never required. It was only a key, and I was holding it now. And it didn't open a door for anyone else this time. Mine was opened.